Summer is here, and hopefully we will have more time to enjoy those books we had planned to read during the summer vacation. Hello everyone, for those who know me, welcome back, and for those who are new here, you are very welcome. I'm Irene Riderelli and this is Into the Books. Perhaps by now you are asking yourself, but if I already have my list of books to read this summer, why should I watch this video? Well, the question is absolutely correct, and my answer to that question is that my intention in making this video is just to give you all the recommendations that you might like, to the point of wanting to enlarge your reading list with some, if not all, of the books I'll talk about in today's episode, and also to give you my point of view on the topic I'm going to talk about next. Today's topic is a kind of analysis of the evolution over the years of the way women have changed when writing male characters. I will start with Mr. Rochester, the main protagonist of the book Jane Eyre. I will take this opportunity to note that among the main characters I will be talking about today, I have not included the beloved Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice, except for a brief comment below, because I already have talked about him in a previous episode, and if you are interested in watching it, I will leave the link to that video in the description box below. Let's not waste more time and let's start. As I just mentioned, the first main character I'm going to tell you about is Mr. Rochester from Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. This novel was published in 1847, and during that time the idea of a woman opposing against the rigid social or moral norms reserved exclusively for women was not as unusual as we might think. With Shakespeare and his female heroines, the public began to become unaccustomed to the traditional representation of women, who went from being almost invisible to society to being recognized for their own value. Thus, from a traditional point of view, the female protagonist of Charlotte Bronte's novel is what one might call normal. What is unusual is the role of Mr. Rochester, who represents all the typical stereotypes of the time, but something happens in his marriage that makes him, in a way, different from the men of his time. Charlotte Bronte emphasizes how much he and Jane Eyre are in love and how happy they are in their marriage, especially Mr. Rochester. Usually, most novels end with the wedding scene and they were happily ever after, without giving a glimpse of the after, and when it happens, 9 times out of 10, it is the man who marries the woman, not the other way around. In the last chapter of Jane Eyre, she specifically says, "Dear reader, I have married him." With these words, the author wants to emphasize the concrete aspect that it was Jane who decided to marry him, not the opposite. Jane Eyre falls in love with Mr. Rochester because he is not only in love with her, he adores her. I can't think of any other book where the male protagonist is so besotted with the female protagonist that he doesn't mind showing his feelings for her and exposing his heart. Mr. Darcy, the male protagonist in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, undoubtedly loves Elizabeth and does not hide his feelings, but believe me, he do not so in the same way that Mr. Rochester does with Jane. He embodies all the passions that are characteristic of romanticism, but rarely ascribed to male characters. In this type of novel, I cannot deny that one of the main reasons Jane Eyre is my favorite novel of all time is Charlotte Bronte's portrayal of Mr. Rochester. We started our journey today by talking about a male character who shows his love and passion for the woman he loves in a very strong and determined way. Will our next protagonist be on the same level Well, let's find out. In Virginia Woolf's book Orlando, the main character is truly emblematic. Orlando was born as a man during the time of Elizabeth I. His story unfolds in Europe over 300 years through several reincarnations. After a mysterious week of sleep, he wakes up feeling like a woman and a new lifestyle begins for him. I believe I am not wrong in stating that with this book, Virginia Woolf was ahead of her time. This statement is not due to the situation that occurs within the novel where a man feels like a woman, but also because of all the topics that she deals with in this novel and which were catalogued as troublesome in 1928 and therefore were not recurring arguments in most books. I simply mention it because I want to emphasize the novelty of the themes that Virginia Woolf puts figuratively on the table at that time. I can't remember reading any other book where the protagonist wakes up from a long sleep feeling like a woman. Sure, I've read about people falling in love with other people of the same sex, but I've never read a book where the protagonist undergoes a complete inner change from male to female. What surprises me is the fact that the image of man and their representation at the beginning of the 20th century was completely different from that of the protagonist of the book, and that is why the cultural impact of the book Orlando by Virginia Woolf was something amazing, because it represents 100% a literary innovation which, in my opinion, has an added value because it dared to touch subjects that were considered taboo at the time of its publication, such as the softening of the protagonist's character to the point of completely transforming his masculine personality. The man who closes today's episode is someone you might not have expected, given the personalities of the male protagonists mentioned before. I chose the author who created the character of the third male protagonist we will talk about because she portrays man in a way that is really enjoyable. I really like all of her books, but if I had to choose one, I wouldn't know which one to pick because I am torn between Powerless and White Love, or if you prefer, between Jasper and Ford, the respective male protagonists. I'm talking about Elsie Silver, a contemporary romance writer, and it is important to clarify this because her writing style is obviously very different from that of Charlotte Bronte and Virginia Woolf. The intention of discussing a character of hers with those of two authors from past century is only to note how the style of writing male characters has changed from one century to the next. It is not a matter of making comparison of authorial quality or passing judgment. With the first two protagonists, I wanted to set a point of reference to show how much the male protagonists of books have changed in a little over a century. Charlotte Bronte writes about a man who is madly in love with Jane, to the extent that he tricks her into marrying him without truly considering what she wants. So we can say that he does not fully respect her at all, even if his intentions are respectable. On the other hand, Virginia Woolf's protagonist is the epitome of the drastic change in the representation of male character of the time. But what can we say about contemporary male protagonists? Elsie Silver's men fulfill all the typical stereotypes of male protagonists. They are hard-working men who have built a barrier around themselves due to some bad experiences, who are not very comfortable expressing their feelings and who would rather move heaven and earth than get in touch with their feelings or let others see them, especially the women they love. In addition, when the right woman enters their lives, they act suspicious to the point of being rude, although over time they gradually open up to the woman they love. So we could say that from this point of view, we are very far from Mr. Rochester, right? Well, not really. These contemporary men are portrayed masculine, hard workers, respectful toward their loved ones, but what is undeniable is the fact that more and more often the authors are starting to normalize feelings in men. What I mean, are you probably wondering? Mr. Rochester shows his feelings, but in a very different way. When Jane runs away, it is almost until the end of the book that the reader knows all the struggles that this man goes through during her absence, and we know about his suffering, but only because it is Jane who tells what happened with Mr. Rochester during that time. Then, in a way, we could say that it is her point of view, not his. Nowadays, authors tend to describe feelings of male protagonists, but from male point of view. It's a fine line, almost imperceptible, but there is a difference between telling the story from a man's perspective and telling it from a woman's perspective. In the novels from the past century, men showed their emotions, but the writers did not let the reader see the real depth of these feelings. For example, in most novels of that time, when the characters were rejected by the ladies, they maintained such an impeccable composure that it could even be mistaken for coldness. Maybe what wins the readers' hearts nowadays is this perfect balance between being cold and unaffected by the external world and being so loving and caring with the loved ones. It is the showing part of this balance that really captivates the audience. Thank you for joining me to the end of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it all. Please let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. I would love to read them. And if you haven't already done so, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and share this video with someone you think might be interested. As usual, I'll see you next week.